Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high.
In 1968, when Elvis Presley heard that Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, Elvis looked down with tears in his eyes. Elvis said, "That man always told the truth." 2 months later, on Elvis's TV special, he sang "If I Can Dream," a new song inspired by Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. The next year, in 1969, Elvis released the song "In the Ghetto," about the terrible struggle of many people born in severe poverty. The music of Elvis came from gospel, country, rhythm and blues, rock, even opera. Elvis was one of the most sexy, most passionate, most romantic male singers of the 1900s in the United States. Some of my favorite Elvis songs are "Don't Be Cruel," "Return to Sender," "Love Me Tender," "It's Now or Never," "Are You Lonesome Tonight," "If I Can Dream," "In the Ghetto," "Suspicious Minds," "Burning Love." Some words in those songs I would change, but I love Elvis's wonderful, intensely passionate, magnificent singing. Born in 1935, Elvis was 42 when he died. Sadly, his addiction to money and drugs, his eating and living unhealthy, aged him, killed him many years early. If Elvis had eaten and lived healthy, he might have lived another 40 years or more. We can learn from others how to live and how not to live. I invite you to learn from my many mistakes. I foolishly and dangerously drove cars and trucks when I was very sleepy many years ago. I participated in cruelty to cattle and pigs in our family business. I was addicted to watching violent westerns on TV when I was a teenager. I was addicted to eating meat, cheese, sugar shit, ice cream, cake, cookies, candy, pie when I was a teenager and in my 20s. I was addicted to religion and the Bible as a sincere young Christian preacher over 50 years ago. I swallowed and I spread false advertising for God. Learn from my many mistakes. If your parents are still living, and if you want to ask forgiveness from your mother or dad about anything, do it now. If you want to ask your mother or dad personal questions about their lives, do it now. If you want to answer their questions about your life, your ways, your feelings, do it now. If you want to thank your mother and dad, if you want to compliment them, if you want to confront them nonviolently, do it now. No future moment is guaranteed. Many people stand with overwhelming regrets at silent graves. Following someone's wise example is the most sincere compliment I can give to that person. Computers make it so easy for lonely, sex-hungry people to get entrapped and prosecuted for sex crimes by the government. Do not take the bait. Do not get entrapped, no matter how lonely, how sex-hungry you are. The working life of most computers is about 2 years. Every day, over 150,000 computers become obsolete. Most of these computers are dumped in India, Pakistan, or China, where they poison much water because of the computer's lead and other poison chemicals. I am glad I have never owned a computer. One U.S. soldier who has spoken out courageously, eloquently about the Iraq War was Camilo Mejia. Camilo was imprisoned in Fort Sill in Lawton, Oklahoma, for refusing to return to fight in Iraq. Camilo fought in Iraq from April to October 2003, eventually commanding an infantry squad. He and his squad were ordered to so-called soften up detainees, prisoners, at a center near the Baghdad airport. They were taught to keep prisoners awake by banging on metal walls with sledgehammers. They were taught to frighten hooded prisoners by pulling the trigger of a gun near the heads of those prisoners. Camilo Mejia witnessed the killing of civilians, the use of excessive force in battle, and all of this troubled him at the time, but he found it difficult to sort out his thoughts. Camilo said, "Being at risk every second of my life made it very hard to put into perspective how I felt about the war and about being in the military. There was always a sense of emptiness in what we were doing, a certain spiritual pain every time we were attacked, but the tendency was always to find ways to stay alive and put away feelings about the war and its reasons." But in October 2003, while home on leave, Camilo had the opportunity to think deeply, seriously, on his experiences in Iraq. Camilo said, "I have held a rifle to a man's face, a man on the ground and in front of his mother, his children, his wife, and not known why I did it. I've seen a soldier broken down inside because he killed a child. I admit that in Iraq there was the fear of being killed, but there was also the fear of killing innocent people, the fear of putting myself in a position where to survive means to kill. There was a fear of losing my soul in the process of saving my body. I was afraid of waking up one morning to realize my humanity had abandoned me." Finally, Camilo Mejia understood that he could not continue to participate in that war. He refused orders to return to Iraq. He said, by putting my weapon down, I chose to reassert myself as a human being. Found guilty of desertion, Camilo Mejia was sentenced to the maximum penalty, a year in prison. I compliment hero of conscience, Camilo Mejia. Every year, 2 million Americans become seriously ill from correctly prescribed drugs taken properly. Every year, over 100,000 Americans die from correctly prescribed drugs taken properly. I have taken no prescription drugs for over 25 years. Eating much meat causes global climate chaos as bad as driving a large SUV. I eat no meat. I own no car. The CIA is the U.S. President's private army to assassinate, to torture, to overthrow governments, totally secret from most people in the United States. Violence and revenge are never the answer. Evil does not conquer evil. Revenge multiplies evil. Only good conquers evil. Treat others as we want others to treat us. Love, forgive, and do good to our enemies are sure laws of wisdom, just as solid as the law of gravity. When someone is drunk or crazy, he may think he can jump off a tall building and fly. He thinks he can break the law of gravity and get away with it, but he cannot. And when someone is drunk on rage or crazy with revenge, he may think he can heal his hurt, his sorrow, by severely beating his enemy or by killing his enemy, but he cannot. He poisons his own soul, his life, and these are the sure laws of the universe. We do not break these laws. We break ourselves if we live contrary to these laws. Revenge is like a taffy-coated, poisoned, rotten apple. Revenge looks attractive, and the first bite tastes sweet. But the final result is we poison ourselves with our hatred and violence toward others, regardless of how we try to justify our attitude, our actions, regardless of how wrong what the other persons did to us, and regardless if the government ever catches and prosecutes us for our violent revenge. Parents who hit and beat their children were not held, hugged, and cuddled enough when they were children. Adults who are starved for affectionate sexual pleasure hit and beat their children. Most violent adults have little or no affectionate sexual pleasure in their lives. Affectionate sexual pleasure drives violence out of our hearts, our lives. Warmly affectionate societies are not likely to be physically violent. Societies which give their babies the most fondling and caressing have less stealing, commit little or no torture, mutilation, and killing of enemies. Societies which inflict the most pain on their babies, slapping and hitting their babies, treating women badly, men dominating the women, worship gods that are cruel, mean, monsters. If a person is warmly hugged and cuddled a lot as a baby, but is later denied affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person may still, sadly, become violent. If a person receives little or no hugging and cuddling as a baby, but later enjoys affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person can heal from being starved for affection early in life and not become violent. When a person is starved for caressing and fondling as a baby and is also later forbidden affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person is very likely to be violent. Affectionate body pleasure throughout life, from birth to death, drives out violence. Secure societies that have strict taboos against sex outside of marriage are usually more violent, often become addicted to war, and worship mean, cruel, monster gods. People deprived of affectionate body pleasure throughout life, especially as babies, children, and teenagers, usually become addicted to violence and war, watching murder mysteries, war movies as entertainment instead of sexually affectionate porno, which sadly some people call dirty. Why are violent movies with blood and guts and gore labeled action movies? And why do many people label sex movies, even very affectionate romantic sex, dirty, crazy values? Many moviegoers are less offended seeing a woman's clothed breast stabbed than seeing a woman's naked breast kissed and caressed. Most U.S. parents are far less disturbed when their teenagers watch a murder mystery or a war movie than when their teenagers watch a couple making love on the screen. Insane values. People whose parents seldom hugged them, seldom kissed them, and instead hit and beat them are likely to become hostile, crazy, mean, when they drink booze, especially. These people prefer booze rather than affectionate sexual pleasure. Booze and other drugs become a rotten, evil substitute for affectionate sexual pleasure. And these people, sadly, would rather get drunk than stay sober and make love. Animals starved for being touched early in life mutilate their own bodies, and often as adult animals avoid being touched. For these animals, violence and pain replace body pleasure. People who curse affectionate sexual pleasure usually support spanking and hitting children to punish them. People who curse affectionate sexual pleasure often believe violence is the way to solve problems. They become often in love with their guns. Plenty of affectionate touching throughout life drives out physical violence. If you were starved for warm affection as a baby, and if you also were forbidden affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, but now you see your great need for tender touching and being touched, start where you are to change your life. Your healing takes time and determination. Make friends with men and women who enjoy giving and receiving hugs and massage. Reach out to find men or women you are attracted to and who are attracted to you to give and receive affectionate sexual pleasure. Enjoy making love to yourself. Pleasure yourself sexually with no shame and no guilt. We can heal, slowly heal, regardless of our past. We can change. Make love, not war. I refuse to give a dime to the American Cancer Society. Big shots from chemical companies and other cancer-causing companies are on the board of directors of the American Cancer Society. So the American Cancer Society refuses to take a strong stand condemning the cancer-causing pesticides and many other killer chemicals people are exposed to in their work, in their home, in their food, by toxic waste dumps contaminating many communities. One gas-powered lawnmower produces as much hydrocarbon pollution as 2 or more cars. I would not keep a car if you gave me one free. I would not keep a lawnmower if you gave me one free. Bishop Dom Helder Câmara of Brazil spoke years ago he spoke up strongly for poor people, for oppressed people. Bishop Dom Helder Câmara, a hero of conscience, said, "When I fed the hungry, I was called a saint. But when I asked why these people are hungry, I was called a communist." One of the best exercises for releasing muscular constriction is making love. One of the best exercises for toning back muscles and for relaxing the nervous system is making love. Orgasm is the best muscle relaxant. Orgasm has 10 times the effect of Valium without the bad side effects of Valium. Orgasm is free, orgasm is natural, and orgasm feels real good. I strongly recommend the book Roger's Recovery from AIDS by Bob Owen, Owen, PhD, the amazing true story of Roger Cochrane, who suffered terribly from AIDS. He recovered completely from AIDS through a 35-day supervised fast, only fresh, raw juices and water, sunshine, bed rest, fresh air, and tender, loving care. I highly recommend that book, Roger's Recovery from AIDS. I have a copy. What right does the United States have to demand that other nations stop the flow of heroin and cocaine to the United States when the United States government and U.S. tobacco companies push their cigarettes on other nations? U.S. cigarettes kill more people in other nations than the number of U.S. people killed by heroin and cocaine that come from other nations. I despise, I reject cigarettes, heroin, cocaine, and booze. All of them are poison to our bodies. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause her baby to have a small head and brain and mental retardation. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause facial deformities and slow growth in her baby. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause heart defects, poor coordination in her baby. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause vision and behavior problems and hyperactivity in her baby and the child as the years pass. In World War I, 10 million soldiers were murdered on the battlefields of Europe. Millions more were gassed, crippled, shell-shocked, driven crazy on the battlefields of Europe. In World War II, 40 million people were murdered. In the 40 years after World War II ended in 1945, 150 more wars with 20 million people murdered. In World War II, 350,000 U.S. men refused the military draft. 6,000 of them were sent to prison for refusing to murder people in war. 1 out of every 6 prisoners in the United States federal prison during World War II was a conscientious objector, a person who refuses to murder in war. And during the Vietnam War, over 500,000 over 500,000 U.S. men refused the military draft. I congratulate them. I thank them for refusing to go to war. 200,000 were prosecuted. 8,750 were convicted of draft evasion. 34,000 U.S. soldiers were court-martialed and sent to prison for opposing the Vietnam War. I salute, I compliment these heroes of conscience. The weapons designed for decades at Sandia Labs, Los Alamos Labs, are aimed to murder far more men, women, and kids than the many millions that Hitler and the Nazis killed in the concentration camps and the gas ovens and World War II. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, as it did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan in 1945, the billions of dollars, the vast resources, the brain power to make the bombs are stolen from the poor of this world. The billions of dollars, the vast resources, the brain power to make the bombs could provide decent shelter, clean water, nutritious food for many millions of desperately poor people. These bombs are murdering poor people right now. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, the radioactive and chemical contamination from the weapons labs, the weapons factories, the weapons testing can make sick and kill multitudes of people for thousands of years. Multitudes of children born deformed or retarded. Multitudes of people with cancers or damaged immune systems. The cleanup costs for the nuclear bombs, radioactive and chemical poisons in the United States alone is $300 billion. That's 1,000 times $300 million. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, these bombs are a constant backup threat, international terrorism against many nations of poor people worldwide, to keep those nations down, to keep them under the bloody terrorist control of the U.S. empire and multinational corporations, robbing those poor of their labor and natural resources, keeping the poor there in many smaller nations in economic slavery to the U.S. empire. And some of you working at Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin, are torn inside, torn in your conscience, just as many U.S. white people were torn in their conscience 200 years ago about enslaving black people. I urge you to quit your job in mass murder at Sandia Weapons Lab, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Kirtland Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin. In Germany under Hitler, many Germans said they needed jobs. Times were bad. So they took jobs at the death camps, slaughtering, mass murdering millions of Jews, gypsies, gays, handicapped, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses. These Germans running the death camps excused themselves that it was for national security. Our government told us to do it. They said those prisoners were the curse of the nation. The guards and the secretaries in the Nazi camps were clean. They were on time. They were carefully dressed. They were polite to their friends. They joked with each other. And they mass murdered people for a paycheck. Many Nazi officers wore shoes polished to a perfect shine. Many secretaries typed fast with no mistakes. But all for what? To hold jobs officially murdering human beings. And the same damn crimes against humanity, and much worse today, at Sandia Weapons Lab, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base. Albuquerque's worst criminal insanity is nuclear bombs and preparing for more wars. Many of you well-dressed, carefully manicured women who work at Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base, you would not want any blood on your car seat. You would not want any blood on your living room carpet. But preparing to shed oceans of other people's blood is your daily business. Many of you well-dressed, church-going women at Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin, would be ashamed as hell, to sell your body for money on East Central. But sadly, you sell your conscience, you sell your brain, you sell your career, year after year, to nuclear bombs. And this is far worse, far more evil than selling bodies on East Central. And many of you men in well-pressed suits and uniforms would be ashamed as hell to have your son or daughter sell drugs to hustle money. But you sell your conscience. You sell your brain. You sell your career to the gods of war, money, and U.S. empire. And you parents working on the weapons of mass murder, some of you tell your children an honest B in school is far better than a dishonest A. And that's true. That's right. But do you not realize that a life-giving job at minimum wage is infinitely better than a mass murder job at Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Kirtland Air Force Base, Sandia Weapons Lab, or Lockheed Martin? No matter how large your paycheck, no matter how many your fringe benefits, no matter how much status in your neighborhood for working at those places. Talk about street gangs showing no conscience in drive-by shootings. What about gangs of scientists, secretaries, suppliers who show no conscience in preparing the bombings of whole cities of men, women, and kids? Talk about the 9/11 atrocity at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin. Far worse, terrorizing and targeting many whole nations, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. Sandia Weapons Lab, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Kirtland Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin. The worst violent murder gangs in New Mexico, committing far more violence than all the New Mexico street gangs combined. Where are the New Mexico priests, the preachers, the rabbis, the imams, the teachers, the politicians, the newspaper editors, the business leaders who have the balls and who have the courage, the conscience to say all of this publicly over and over again? The wildest young horses can become the best adult horses. Some children are rebellious because they have creative genius wanting to burst forth. Some children misbehave because they've been abused, beaten, ignored, raped, cursed, starved for love. Some children are rebellious because they do not fit into the huge factory-like public schools. Some children misbehave because their body and their brain's chemistry is severely messed up by processed sugar, artificial chemicals in the junk food they eat. And they do not get enough healthy food, exercise, sleep, sunshine. In Western Europe, children almost never receive Ritalin or other prescription drugs for hyperactivity. Take yourself and your child off all processed junk food, all cooked food, no Cokes, no ice cream, no hot dogs, no fry bread, no donuts, no hamburgers, no pizza. Get rid of the computer games. Exercise vigorously with your children, not just telling them, well, you go out and exercise while you sit in front of the TV, lazy, out of shape. No, exercise with your children every day. Take long walks with your children. Enjoy nature together if you're physically able. The natural way to learn is for children to move, to touch, and to be involved in gardening, preparing meals, washing clothes by hand. Many students are expected to sit hour after hour in school and to do whatever they're told. Terribly frustrating for children. It makes learning difficult. For the whole school day, children are under constant surveillance. No time alone. No space to be alone. Children are caged in confinement with people exactly their same age. Children are often kept from exploring the things they are really interested in, from exploring the things they're curious about. If the parents are able, warm, and open, often parents teaching the children at home is far better than public school or private school. Homeschooling in many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways, can be best. Chemotherapy for cancer does not help many of those cancer patients to recover, to feel better, to live longer. Chemotherapy is of no benefit at all to many cancer patients. Now, it may help some, but the odds are not good. Chemotherapy makes the legal drug pushers, the big drug companies, filthy rich. Chemotherapy can cause horrible human misery. Chemotherapy is legal poison aimed at the cancer, but chemotherapy also often kills the patient before it destroys the cancer. And many cancer doctors would not allow chemotherapy to be given to themselves or to their families because they know the horrific risks. Many cancer doctors know that chemotherapy seldom helps, often harms. Sadly, chemotherapy kills many cancer patients. No chemotherapy for me. Never. Hell no. The seed of anger is always within us. And when I'm angry, I need to admit I'm angry, never to deny it. I must never despise my anger. I must never suppress my anger. I need to recognize my anger, embrace my anger, and transform my anger into compassion and understanding. Sometimes it helps to give a gift to the person I'm angry with. Anger is suffering. And venting anger, like hitting a pillow or pounding the wall, can increase the anger. That's not the best way, the wise way to handle our anger. We need to recognize our anger, embrace our anger, transform our anger into compassion and understanding. And we can use the tremendous energy of anger to do a job that needs to be done, maybe cleaning out that shed in the backyard or picking up the trash for a couple blocks around in the community. We can use the tremendous energy of anger to exercise our bodies, go running when angry, play the piano or the guitar, sing, work in the garden, take a long walk, exercise vigorously, and let the sunshine and nature heal us. We can use our anger for good things. I thank many Jews in the United States and in Israel who have spoken out loud and clear publicly against the Israeli government's brutal oppression and mass murder of Palestinians. I congratulate hundreds of Israeli Jewish soldiers who have refused to be soldiers in the West Bank and Gaza because of the constant atrocities the Israeli government commits against the Palestinians. One former Israeli Jewish soldier said that Israeli soldiers committed, quote, unimaginable practices against Palestinians, competing among themselves who could kill more Palestinians, bragging afterward about how many they killed, deliberately targeting and killing children, simply walking home from school, and slamming the heads of handcuffed Palestinians into concrete walls. The powerful testimony of a former Israeli soldier who dared to speak the truth against the Israeli government atrocities toward the Palestinians. Israel has illegally occupied and controlled the Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza, for 55 years. The United States has used Israel in the Middle East to control the whole region because of U.S. addiction to oil. U.S. federal income tax dollars buy the tanks, buy the helicopters, the bulldozers, the missiles the Israeli military uses to terrorize, cripple, blind, paralyze, make homeless, murder the Palestinian people. Israel receives billions, not millions, billions of dollars every year from the U.S. government. Israel receives far more U.S. federal income tax dollars than any other nation on earth. Every U.S. federal income taxpayer pays for Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians. The U.S. empire also supports corrupt Arab dictatorships in Egypt, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in order to control the region because of U.S. addiction to oil. The U.S. empire sides with Israel against the Palestinians. And sadly, most all members of Congress and the major presidential candidate are scared to hell of speaking out against Israeli atrocities, largely because of the powerful pro-Israel government lobby in Washington, D.C. The Israeli military has killed hundreds of Palestinian boys and girls. The Israeli military has wounded thousands of Palestinian boys and girls. Scores of nations worldwide have often condemned Israeli persecution of Palestinians, but the U.S. government, sadly, strongly supports Israeli persecution of Palestinians. I oppose all violence by Israelis against Palestinians. I oppose all violence by Palestinians against Israelis. I strongly support peace and human rights for all people in Israel and in Palestine. Revenge and more violence are not the answer for Israelis or for Palestinians. I refuse to pay 1 penny of federal income tax in the United States for Israel to rob, to terrorize, to torture, to blind, to paralyze, to make homeless, to murder the Palestinian people. I have paid not one damn bloody penny of U.S. federal income tax for 43 years. A woman from the Netherlands hiked through a jungle in the wrong shoes. She had lost her good shoes. And when she got home, her right foot looked terrible. The big toe was completely open and full of dirt. And the next day, her foot was terribly swollen, very painful. The doctor said that either she had to take antibiotics or her foot would have to be amputated. But the woman placed a cloth soaked in her own urine, soaked in her own piss, on her toes and foot, up to the ankle, and wrapped a plastic bag around the cloth. And within a few hours, the pain was gone. Although the wounds on her toes and the swelling were still there, the doctor panicked. He became angry with her, but she did not want to take antibiotics. And the first 2 days, she changed those urine cloths, those piss cloths, every 2 hours. And she drank the rest of the urine. Within a week, her foot was better. The doctor was still angry, but he was also surprised. Since then, the doctor has cured many people with urine therapy. We can wake up. Even doctors can wake up. This woman from the Netherlands later worked a lot with urine therapy for earaches, eye infections, fevers, burns, sunburn. Urine therapy helped heal all of those ailments. She said, in her opinion, urine therapy is the most miraculous, the most effective way to treat all physical illnesses. It not only eliminates the symptoms, but also works on the causes. I have drunk my piss every day since November 10th, 1999. Our piss is the water of life to prevent sickness and to heal sickness. And I highly recommend 3 books. I have all of them at home. The Water of Life by J.W. Armstrong of England. Urine Therapy by 2 women from Germany, whose names I kind of forget at the moment. And my favorite is Golden Fountain, The Complete Guide to Urine Therapy by Cohen Vanderkroon. That's C-O-E-N, Cohen, Van, V-A-N, space D-E-R, space Kroon, capital K-R-O-O-N, Cohen Vanderkroon. Golden Fountain, The Complete Guide to Urine Therapy. If you're just starting out and want to experiment, start with a few drops of your urine, and then a teaspoon, then a tablespoon. And the healthier you eat, the better healing will come from your piss. And if you take any kind of drugs, prescribed legal drugs or illegal street drugs, be sure to start only with drops or a teaspoon, because some of those drugs are in your piss. To your health. Thanks for watching and listening. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on.